Ro has dreams. He dreams of having the opportunity to represent the people of this district. He dreams of improving the lives of the people around him, and he dreams of making a difference in the world. What you probably don't know is that our relationship also began with a dream. Over the past year and a half, I have been coming out to California, and I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting residents of the 17th District. Some of you have asked me how Ro and I met, so I've decided to take a moment today and tell you our story. As I was saying, the story begins with a dream, literally. In 2007, a mutual acquaintance of ours had a dream that Ro and I were together, happy, and thanking her. She shared this information with each of us separately. From there, fate took over. Or so I long believed. But I see now that fate had a very strong helping hand from Ro. Shortly after, Ro was in New York visiting his brother, and we had our first date. Ro will tell anyone who asks that for him, it was love at first sight. For me, it wasn't quite as easy. As you may have guessed, as that was 8 years ago. However, it was that evening after dinner, as we talked over drinks, that I first saw the light that Ro gets in his eyes when he talks about public service. To this day, without a hint of jadedness, it's the same look he gets when we talk about our future and the impact he hopes to make. I barely knew this man sitting across from me, but I knew there was something unique about him, something special that was unlike anyone I had met. A few weeks later, under the false guise that he needed to be in New York for some other reason other than to see me, Ro and I went on our second date. We saw a terrible play, we had awkward conversation over dinner, and then he basically proceeded to ask me to spend the rest of my life with him. Knowing Ro now, that isn't as surprising as it was at the time. And as crazy as I thought he was then, I suppose that I now have to admit that he had the vision to see something I didn't. But at the time, I, ever the rational one, hastily extracted myself from the situation, said goodnight, and put an end to the situation, or so I thought. In the following months, Ro would email me every now and then, taking the temperature of the situation, trying to stay on my radar, I suppose. Sometimes sending me links of his press coverage, mistakenly believing that that would lure me to him. Truly, the man does not give up when something matters to him. 19 months after our second ill-fated date, he asked me out again, and I relented. Okay, I'll admit, his persistence had worked, and I was a little bit curious. Attending one of the 2009 inaugural balls as our fourth date in almost 2 years, we embarked on a long-distance cross-country relationship. Nearly a year in, we went our separate ways, as it just was not meant to be at the time. I know that this was hard for Ro, but instead of losing his way, he threw himself into his work at the Commerce Department and into writing his book about manufacturing. At the same time, he never gave up on what he believed was meant to be. Nearly 4 years went by before we saw each other again. With no concern for his ego and no attention to the bruises from the past, he asked me out again. And I said yes. We went out on a blizzard-plagued night in New York City. While he was making fun of my hooded, full-length, down puffy coat, I was noticing that he had become a more certain version of the man I had remembered. And once again, we found ourselves in a long-distance relationship. It wasn't easy for either of us. He was in the midst of what we all know was a tough and hard-fought campaign. For me, coming into all of that was strange and unfamiliar to say the least. People often ask me how we managed to maintain a bi-coastal relationship with Ro in the midst of an intense political campaign. I'm not sure I was ever able to really answer that question, except to say that we did manage. And in fact, we thrived. I'm not too modest to say that I'm proud of the way we handled that year. I'm immeasurably proud of the campaign Ro ran, of his convictions, his dedication, and his integrity. And I'm proud of the relationship we built. On a recent occasion, Ro and I had the opportunity to share with someone the story of how we met and the over 8-year path that led us here today, an engaged couple preparing to spend our lives together. That man's immediate response was that Ro just needed to put the same commitment, passion, and hard work towards running for Congress. I'm going to take the liberty of saying that I now know Ro better than anyone. And I know that his commitment, passion, and hard work will be completely unrelenting in this race, but even more so once he has the opportunity to represent you and work to make a difference in your lives. And soon I will proudly join Ro in these efforts as I move to California this fall as his wife and his partner on this journey. And as importantly, without my hooded, full-length down puppy coat. Going back to our story, our courtship can be summed up as a first attempt that barely counted, a second attempt that came quite close, and a third attempt that recently landed Ro on one knee, finally getting the response he wanted when he asked once again for me to spend the rest of my life with him. I guess the third time is a charm, and thankfully Ro never gives up on what truly matters to him. That is why Ro is my future husband, and that is why he is your next congressman.
We fired up? We fired